Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a video and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Today, it is my privilege to welcome a very, very senior professional from Singapore, a very good friend, Alicia Yi. Alicia, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Ashutosh. Delighted to be
Alicia,
here.
thank you. Alicia is the Vice Chairman, Board, and CEO practice of Korn for Asia Pacific, based in Singapore. She's also leading the diversity and inclusion practice for Korn for APAC. And most importantly, she is a fellow YPO member, someone who I have a lot of respect for. So, Alicia, tell me, what would you say are three key milestones in your life or your career?
Good question. So there are a couple things. So just to give you a little bit of context of my life, I was born in Korea and I moved to Minnesota when I was about 11.
Okay.
And went to university in Chicago and got married in Chicago, and my career started in Chicago.
Okay.
So I was this Korean American in Chicago as a young professional, entered HR consulting, and felt like a very small fish and a little kid trying to act like a grown-up. And felt that I couldn't really relate to anyone in the firm of 300 people in the Chicago office. And then I worked really hard to overcome all my insecurities. And when I was about 27, I had an opportunity to join another company called Swiss Bank Corporation at the time, SBC, which is part of UBS now, and moved to Zurich. So accepting that first international assignment to Switzerland probably was one of the big milestones, because I had quite a international curiosity and ambition from young age. And so I was doing a global role out of Zurich, learning the nuances of European cultures and countries was a second milestone. And then the third one is my joining the executive search industry about 17, 18 years ago now, from consulting. So I would say those are kind of joining a consulting firm as a young adult in Chicago, to moving to Switzerland, and then joining an executive search industry based in Singapore. Those are the three key milestones, defining moments.
So let's talk now about the executive search and Korn Ferry, where you've spent a long time. Tell me, when I was growing up, and I'm much older, I'm 64, but when I was growing up, they were called headhunters, and now they've become search firms. So when did this transition start to happen in the new century?
Okay, so when I joined the industry about 17, 18 years ago, when people asked me what I did and I said, I'm in executive search, people would always go, what is that? Right? And so I say, oh, it's headhunting. And they're like, oh, yeah, headhunting. Oh, I got it. I know exactly what you do. Right? So I would still say that now less and less so, still the headhunting is a better known kind of street term for my industry. So I think that the differentiation between headhunting and executive search, there are two aspects to it. One is the digital age brought LinkedIn.
Yep.
So in the olden days of my industry, being able to identify the name and the person in the right role to headhunt was a very important capability for a search firm like Korn Ferry, right? So doing that research, getting that CV, knowing that executive, to be able to make that phone call, or who would pick up the phone to hear about the new assignment or opportunity, that's the old-fashioned headhunting. And then the search firm is really about, with a LinkedIn, finding names and titles and people is as easy as a snap.
Correct.
Anyone and everyone can do it. It's democratized. It's bigger than any search firm database. So now it's really, the executive search firms are focused on how do you assess the capabilities, the traits, and the cultural fit of the senior executive to the mandate, to the company, and to the role.
Okay.
Right? So I would say that would be the biggest paradigm shift.
Fantastic. So, if you talk to a lot of middle managers, in most companies around the world, aspirationally, they're all looking to get that one phone call from a search firm to say, we think you've got potential and we've got an opportunity for you. So my question to you as someone who runs such a large search firm is, at what stage do I, as a manager, become relevant to a search firm?
Well, I think it's important to understand that the industry actually offers, there are global 5 executive search firms that everyone knows, right? Korn being one of them. But then there are hundreds, if not thousands, of other search firms, recruitment firms that are global, regional, or country specific or functional specific, right? But we all kind of operate at different levels, different sectors, and we all as individuals, each consultant specializes in something, right? Certain area, either the level or the function or the geography or a combination thereof. So it's very important when you want to become a candidate of any search or recruitment firms that you understand the match between the firm and your profile, right? So often my friends will send me the CV of their children who just graduated from college and say, hey, you are a headhunter. My daughter, who is 22, who's super bright and capable, is looking for a new job. Can you please help her? And I always tell them, I can help you personally from a personal capacity, but I wouldn't have any idea what roles are available and who's hiring a 22-year-old newly graduate, because I work on the C-suite of very large global companies.
Well said, absolutely.
Right? So whether it's HR, finance function, or legal industry or consumer sector, it's very important that you're connecting with the right consultant for what you're looking for. Otherwise, it's a mismatch and waste of time on both ends, and you're not going to get very good response from the other side if you're a candidate.
So, Alicia, that gives me your response gives me a great segue to my next question. As someone who looks at C-suite search, when you're looking for a CEO, other than the technical part, etc., what do you look for in a candidate?
Well, I would say that because of LinkedIn and other technology we have, matching the experience with the search mandate is probably the easiest part.
Right.
And in fact, it can even be done by AI these days.
Correct.
Right? So that's kind of like a ground zero, if you will. Right? So the filtering happens from that on. So we have various filtering processes and associates working on finding the right match through various sources, right? And matching the experience is the easiest part. So by the time they come to interview as a C-suite to be, let's say, my potential candidate for a search, I am honestly trying to get to know the executive holistically. So not just the experience, because that's in the CV, but really what motivates him or her, right? What are they looking for in their point in career? And what's their purpose? And how do they operate? What is their style? What is their energy level? I tend to read a lot on the energy that the person provides, because that's something that you can't really change or hide easily.
Correct.
So I read all of that. So I read the whole person, because that's something that our clients can't find in LinkedIn.
Okay.
Right? And what's my read of that person, and how does he or she match up with what the client is looking for? So in a way, I'm in a matchmaking business.
Correct.
Right? So I have to understand both sides and figure out where there is a common match. And it's not formulaic, because if it was, then an AI could do the job now.
Absolutely.
Right? We have the technology. So it's the humanistic side that I look for, and human qualities.
Well said. So my next question is that in the business of search firms and say in Korn Ferry, what are the core values you believe in?
Well, I think the foremost value is professionalism, right? And very much like YPO, our industry, if you're sitting in my job, in my role, I hear a lot, both from clients and potential candidates, and their backgrounds, personal ambitions, whatnot. People share a lot.
Right.
And I need to keep it as kind of a forward and confidential style, because that trust between me and the candidate, as well as me and the company and the client, honesty, but also discretion is everything.
Okay.
And that's my personal reputation. That's a firm's reputation. Not misleading, not misrepresenting on either side is incredibly important in our profession. So I would say that's probably the foremost important value.
So Alicia, now let's move to the other specialization that you lead, which is on diversity and inclusion. Why is diversity and inclusion becoming so much more relevant today as compared to maybe 10 years ago?
So diversity and inclusion, the concept have existed as far as I can remember, right? I started my career in the 80s. I'm almost 55. And so over the last 30 plus years that I've been in the professional, career, the need for diversity, need for inclusion always kind of existed more on the background. And probably more known in many countries as women's rights, gender diversity, promoting women to more senior positions, etc. But in the recent years, especially, let's say, since the Trump administration and Black Lives Movement took office, and the far left and far right kind of political scene became very prominent in the US. And then there was a George Floyd incident that exploded and further fueled both sides and Black Lives Matter. So those events in the recent years have really ignited the corporate world to embrace and own their contribution or lack of their contribution to creating equal opportunities.
Okay, wonderful.
So that led to a global movement. So it started really extremely in the US, that's moved to European global companies and filtering through Asia Pac. But I must say Asia Pac is behind other regions in that respect.
So, even in a country like India, and I know in several other countries, the government has mandated that in the corporate sector, X number of women will be on the board.
Yeah. Like in India, you require one woman in a listed company.
Now, my question to you, as someone who has said that you want to bring the best people, does that become some kind of a restriction, or is it an opportunity for women?
Well, I think it's an opportunity for not only women, but for companies to expand and consider the full 100% of the talent pool, right? So whenever you're considering only 50% of the talent pool, how can you possibly select the best talent?
Correct.
Right? So if you included 100% of the talent pool, you have a much, much higher chance of selecting the most qualified for that role, regardless of gender. right? So I would think of it as bigger pool to select from, where at the senior level, there's still a huge shortage of very well qualified leaders in every sector and the government.
Okay.
So why should we limit ourselves to looking at only half the population, or in China is considered half the sky?
Okay.
Let's look at the entire sky.
Absolutely. Then you're absolutely right. I mean, the ideal situation is it should be 50-50 everywhere. And I think we are moving towards it. And I'm a great believer in the diversity, and the balance. But what are your thoughts on being able to correct this imbalance faster?
I think there's no magic bullet. Let's just start there. So everyone and every company and every sector, private or public or government or NGO, have to do their part, right? So if you belong to an underrepresented group of any sort in any organization, then you should be able to step up and speak up and show up at the table, right, as an individual. But if you're an organization, part of what Korn Ferry does with our diversity and inclusion practice is that we diagnose the whole organization to see why at the bottom of the pyramid, you have more women than men. But as you move up to middle management, it shrinks down to 30%. And then at the C-suite, it dwindles down to less than 5 to 10% in most countries, right? And at the CEO level, even in a more developed country like the US, still, did you know that in the history of Fortune 500, there are only, let me get this number right, something like 90 female CEOs in the history of Fortune 500.
Wow. That's it.
And I have no idea how many male CEOs there would have been in the history of Fortune 500 in the US,
Amazing.
right?
Amazing.
So just imagine, why is it the population is 50-50, more or less, and the entry level is 50 and 50, more or less. But as you move up in a corporate or government organizations, female leaders are such a scarce commodity.
Correct. And you're absolutely right. I mean, I sincerely hope we'll be able to move this much faster. So let's now move to the next segment of our conversation, which is some questions for you personally.
Sure.
Alicia's, such a long career, so much success, broken through the proverbial glass ceiling yourself. What does success mean to Alicia?
So the success really, the definition of success for me personally changed throughout my career, right? Honestly, when I was at 20-something in Chicago, breaking into the into a consulting industry, survival was my goal. And then I dared sometimes, in my good moments, to become a partner of the firm one day, right? But sometimes I dared not, and sometimes I did. But then in my mid-career, I started gaining some momentum, as well as more experiences, and with it, more confidence. So then I started allowing myself to dream a little bit bigger. But, I think it's very hard for some men to fully appreciate that ambitious women, and let me correct myself, men and women have sometimes hard time appreciating how difficult it is for women to show ambition. Because ambitious women are often really disliked, not only by men, but also by women.
Okay.
She's all about herself. She's sharp-elbowed. She pulls everyone down. It's all about herself. And she, Hillary Clinton was hated and picked Trump over her. And so, qualifications have nothing to do with it. Capabilities have nothing to do with it. If you're ambitious, if you're capable, if you want to make a difference and be influential, a lot of times women are not viewed in a positive light because we're supposed to be maternalistic,
Okay.
soft, and, giving.
Well said. And, again, my next follow-up question to that is that, you're continuously doing newer and newer things. You're wanting to achieve more and more. My question is, where do you draw your inspiration from?
I think I somewhere during my career, I would say the first 20 years of my career, I would say I was driven by my fear of failure. That was my inspiration. I did not want to fail.
Okay.
And I did not want to be one of those women who couldn't carry on the career and so became a mom and a stay home, because that's not what I wanted for myself. And I was really afraid when I had kids that my career would slow down or I wouldn't be a good mom or whatever. So I had a lot of those kind of insecurities that drove me in the earlier 20 years. But I would have to say, as I entered kind of late 40s, early 50s, I became much more comfortable in my own skin.
Okay.
Right? I no longer felt like I have to hide the fact that I was a woman, because I felt like I had to act like a man at work to be accepted, to be taken seriously. I had to dress like a man and act like a man and emotionless and, structured and all that stuff, all those male characters, so-called. So, so now I get my inspiration really from owning my own power, which I just learned to do recently, in recent years, right? And I'm still working on it. And for a lot of women, it's very difficult for us to really own our power. And people say, like, what? I don't understand that. Why should you have to own your power, right? And a lot of women feel more comfortable if I say, well, change the word power into influence.
Okay.
Do you feel a little bit better? So don't feel like you have to own your power, like egotistical, be, chest beating. But how about if you want to influence more people? If you want to create more change? Then if you don't own your power and step up to your leadership role, right? And do a podcast like this, although I'm camera shy. If I don't do it, and if I don't own my power and the platform that I have a privilege to be giving by someone like you, Ashutosh, then how do I share my message?
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So I'm still learning and working on owning my power because what inspires me is really helping the next generation of any diverse background to really flap their wings so that we can create a more equal and just
That's
society.
a very, very powerful message you're giving out. Own your power. I think that's very powerful. And Alicia, my last question to you now. I come back to the pandemic. It's affected everybody. At least you in Singapore have managed it much better. But tell me, how are you rethinking your own life in a new world order?
That's another good question because we've had a very extraordinary year, to say the least, with a lot of challenges. I think for everyone, and I'm not that different in that all of a sudden your nationality became very important.
Correct.
So I became a Singaporean last year because I've lived here for 25 years and I've decided this is where I'm going to retire.
Right.
So it was very important that I became Singapore national in a time like this. So I'm very grateful. And two, I think not being able to travel and move around at any time to any country, anywhere. I think that also changed and influenced me and a lot of our people about how close are you to your loved ones and your family.
Correct.
And what's really important to you in life.
Absolutely.
Is it really the jet set life? and staying at five-star hotels and flying in first and business class flights, enjoying champagne? Or is that being close to your parents, your kids, your friends, your family? So I think those are the things that I think for many of us, including me, have shifted during COVID. So I'm trying to find ways to bring my parents over to Korea, from Korea to Singapore to live with me. And I value my family and friends a little bit more. And it's been really nice to be grounded in Singapore, which turned out to be a very small island, which was new to me because it's a very international city. But I've really enjoyed the gift that came with being grounded.
Fantastic. Alicia, thank you so much. It's been such a pleasure speaking to you. I wish you and everything that you are doing and will do in Korn Ferry lots and lots of success.
Well, thank you so much, Ashutosh, for this opportunity. I am flattered and honored to be here, and I really enjoyed the conversation. So I hope you did too.
Thank you. I did. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.